Hollow Knight has garnered a loving and growing community thanks to Team Cherry graciously packing immense amounts of content into their game. From its abundance of exquisite details to its magnificently complex world building, Hollow Knight and its intricate designs have resonated with fans from all around the world. As a result, the anticipation for Silksong heightens with each passing day as fans grow more and more anxious to experience a new game with new mechanics and secrets, as well as familiarities that made Hollow Knight a masterpiece. Team Cherry has welcomed fans to the kingdom of Pharloom, briefly exhibiting this world's features such as exciting new areas, fresh bosses, unique gripping combat, and more. But regardless of how much Team Cherry has shared about their newest game, only time will tell just how much of Hollow Knight's original concepts will be expanded upon in its sequel. So until that moment arrives, here are 5 Hollow Knight features that should absolutely return in Silksong. Number 5. Weapon interactions. Within Hollow Nest, experimentation with different charm combinations is only ever verbally encouraged by charm lover Salubra, who explains that certain charms like each other and recommends trying on a variety of sequences, instilling curiosity within the player. Although Salubra suggests toying with different trinkets in casual conversation, the insinuation is so subtle that the player may overlook her hints anyway and stumble upon this feature at any given bench. Upon discovering a new interaction, a sense of progression is impressed upon the player as though they've just created a new ability through their own genuine sense of wonder. Charm interactions compound the effects of their respective charms in fun and surprising ways that validate the player's impulse to utilize them together. Provided the player has Sugar Daddy Divine, Unbreakable Strength will surprise them when equipped alongside Fury of the Fallen or Grubberfly's Elegy, increasing damage output beyond its charm's typical threshold. Shape of Un, another unique amulet, will surely charm the player's Void Heart when partnered up with Sportsroom or Baldershell, creating one of the most wholesome and advantageous charm animations in the game. And while initially an enigmatic badge, Defender's Crest subverts expectations by converting glowing womb hatchlings into literal homing missiles. The decision to praise experimentation within the charm system is a design that truly deserves to inherit its integration into Silksong's tool crafting system. With the review of Chakra, Team Cherry stated that a clan of warriors of which members honed craft skills would prove useful to Hornet's Wayfarer. Assuming these craft skills affect how Hornet's tools interact with each other, this update could hint at the implementation of the charm combination concept. Salubra also mentions the detriment of equipping too many charms at once, claiming that the effects are overwhelming. However, overcharming is another device worth exploiting once again in Silksong due to it actually recognizing confident players who boost the game's difficulty by personalizing their collection further. Players are afforded the benefits of one more otherwise non-equipable charm at the cost of suffering double damage, provided one notch is available. The ability to equip charms of all kinds without restrictions, save for how many notches are unoccupied, allows the player to construct the type of build they believe is best. Whether they consider themselves spellcasters, nail masters, companion conjurers, or preservative players, there are no conditions surrounding the selection of charm types. Contrarily, the Silksong reveal trailer highlights Hornet's crests which, in theory, initially appeared to limit the amount of tools that can be equipped by yellow, blue, and red categories. Hornet's crest contains slots colored in coordination with each category, implying that perhaps tool builds will be predetermined by crest type as opposed to charm builds which were freely assembled. The freedom to construct an individualized loadout is a freedom that Team Cherry is strongly encouraged to deliver in Silksong's tool system, but to what degree, only crests will decide.
Number 4. Small details. It's no major secret that this game delivers details of incredibly high quality, which beckon curiosity at every turn, despite its limited financial resources and only a trio of developers. Simply by looking at how much the game changed after they switched engines, it's not difficult to see that Team Cherry flexed their creative muscles as much as they possibly could. And although making a game with remarkable level or character design is rather commonplace in other critically acclaimed entries of the Metroidvania ilk, Team Cherry made their IP truly flourish by putting an equal amount of love, care, and effort into every single detail there is to be found in Hollow Knight, not just the ones that heavily influence the story or game mechanics. From the second players are dropped into Hollow Nest, there's an immediate sense of vibrancy that seeps out of every facet of the game. When the player looks up or down at this vast world, the knight always tilts its head accordingly. Sitting at benches for extended periods of time reveals a simple animation of the knight drifting off, only to later jerk itself awake when the player is ready to take off. Pulling up the map makes the knight actually glance down at the parchment, and it's even kept out when you're walking around. But especially since they were short on finances and manpower, Team Cherry could have easily included these features without all these tiny additions. Why would the knight need to tilt its head when the camera works just fine as it is? Why bother making a sleeping animation for the benches, when most players will just hop on and off to save, or quickly swap charms? Why would they need to make the knight look down at the map when this animation is always behind a darkened screen, almost completely covered by the map itself? Nevertheless, Team Cherry implemented these designs to help Hollow Knight truly distinguish itself. None of these additions are necessary, or offer anything mechanically. They just simply make Hallownest feel that much more alive, eventually to the point where we start to grow fond of this little hollowed out vessel because of how ironically alive it feels under our control. Every action feels like it has meaning because even the most mundane tasks have consequences directly on display for us. Charms, for example, add an entirely separate layer of detail with how much they influence the environment. Wearing Spore Shroom will allow us to talk to Mr. Mushroom, but can also let the knight comprehend the mushroom lore tablets as well. Equipping Hive Blood suddenly turns all of the bees passive because of how they operate from a lore perspective. Even the Defender's Crest attracts flies when wearing it in the kitchen inside of the Pleasure House, which is quite literally a hidden area within a sub-area. Seriously, who in the hell would actually discover this through anything other than sheer coincidence? On top of this, the little things beyond what we actually control drive home how responsive the world actually feels, whether it be grass swaying as the knight brushes by, or dust that maps out the knight's arc when it jumps. From top to bottom, this franchise has been laced with artistic intricacies that simply must resurface in Silksong to the same magnitude of eloquence that was achieved with the first game. From the trailers and teasers we've seen so far, things are looking damn good in terms of polish and detail, as to be expected from Team Cherry. But with how expansive Pharloom apparently is, it would be an injustice if we don't get the same level of ornate fidelity for the sequel to the game that already performed this feat so incredibly well.
Number 3. Path of Pain Platforming. Team Cherry's obscure decision to make the Path of Pain neither mandatory nor apparent ironically incentivized players all the more to attempt the trial. Team Cherry ingeniously taunted the player by not only hiding this gauntlet, but also by teasing at its protected secrets with a seal of binding resembling the Hollow Knight. The pillar at the start of the path warns about the torture that follows, yet does little to nothing to inhibit the player's decision to advance, especially if they've already parkoured the rest of the White Palace. However, while the White Palace encompasses safer platforms, multiple routes, even shortcuts, the Path of Pain brutally contrasts these devices with unforgiving platforming, precise trajectory with little room for error, and an oppressively claustrophobic environment. It's within the White Palace that the player's understanding of the knight's moveset is tested, but it's within the Path of Pain that their grasp of these abilities is stressed to its limits. It's worth mentioning that prior to entering the White Palace, several descending tunnels throughout the kingdom may condition the player to expect new discoveries or comfort at the bottom of these ravines. The chasm in Crystal Peak leading to the Dreamer's Shrine, the crevice in Deepness dropping into a hot spring and bench, and the burrow in Kingdom's Edge connecting to a massive geodeposit all may predispose the player's expectations of what rewards possibly await below. As a result, the player may inhale a deep sigh of relief upon descending down the tunnel at the end of the Path of Pain. Ultimately, rather than a leap of faith, the path shatters this assumption with a literal fall from grace as the player is ambushed by two King's Modes that shock them out of their false sense of safety due to the notion of losing all their progress if defeated. Ironically, if the player has equipped a charm sequence that prioritizes the coma-inducing platforming, this could hinder their chances of survival against the awaiting assault. If the player is overpowered by the King's Modes their first time, this surprise gauntlet forces them to re-strategize their charm build to better suit not only the ambush that forever severs their trust in Team Cherry, but also the gruesome platforming they must now repeat from the beginning. Fortunately, the path houses statues of the Hollow Knight that not only provide infinite soul, but additionally heal the player's morale by serving as checkpoints that encourage them to progress further. Upon conquering the Path of Pain, the player is rewarded with the Hunter's Journal entry for a seal of binding, described as capable of preserving something of great importance. While initially anticlimactic, this entry recognizes the player's tenacity in overcoming arguably the most arduous punishment in the entire game, and is proof that no secret shall hide from their steel resolve. The integration, design, and psychology of the Path of Pain are powerful enough reasons to merit more challenges of similar caliber in Silksong. Team Cherry has revealed that Hornet will be faster, more acrobatic, and will be equipped with new moves and abilities, all of which beg to be tested in platforming situations as extreme as the Path of Pain, if not more.
Number 2. Streamlined Combat. For a game categorized as a Metroidvania, Hollow Knight simply couldn't afford to shy away from a fleshed-out system of combat. Acquiring new and transformative upgrades as the player progresses is a staple mechanic for games of this kind, but Team Cherry was still able to breathe new life into this subgenre through their synergy of mainline fighting and gradually introduced abilities. Although other elements prosper with an abundance of detail, the combat system is everything but complex. At its core, this game has very few expectations in terms of what's necessary to achieve victory. If you're able to properly swing your nail, jump, and dash, you can overcome just about every obstacle in the game. What makes this system shine is that it introduces abilities which can make otherwise difficult encounters way easier. But it also never bars players from making full use of the more niche mechanics. Supplementing nail swings with spells, charms, and nail arts produces an easy-to-learn, hard-to-master approach. Abyss Shriek offers massive burst damage, while Descending Dark provides extended moments of invulnerability, but you have to learn to deal with periods of immobilization, and be able to efficiently balance soul usage between healing and spells. Nail arts have larger hitboxes and zone pressure as opposed to regular nail swings, but they take some time to charge, and they have limited vertical utility. Regarding enhancements to mobility, the Shade Cloak and Monarch Wings also alter how aggressive players can be. Shade Cloak's iframes further refine our individual playstyles, as we may choose to use them either offensively or defensively. Utilizing Monarch Wings, in conjunction with dashing and Mantis Claw, demonstrates how items can be woven together seamlessly for proficient movement. Team Cherry understands how to make combat accessible by allowing a bare-bones style of play still completely viable. Yet they complement this concept with unique abilities that can substantially amplify how easily players overcome challenges. Overall, Hollow Knight almost always encourages you to tailor the gameplay around your particular preferences. Want to worry about only jumping, dashing, and regular nail swings? Go for it. Prefer to use spells and nail arts for rapid damage? Sure, that works too. Interested in passive attack methods with pets made of dung? That's a little bit weird, but why the hell not? We're provided with fundamentally simple and streamlined systems of combat and movement so that we can later on choose to utilize specific abilities as we see fit. And with Silksong adopting a similar formula, I can't imagine that the game would be better off by ditching streamlined combat altogether. Things already look pretty good regarding how much of an emphasis there is behind Hornet's Needle. It being the primary weapon could hint that this approach to both combat and movement will return, albeit in slightly different ways. Each component Hornet receives will have to be crafted with the same concepts behind Hollow Knight's combat so that this formula doesn't become a mess. Much like charms, tools shouldn't overshadow the needle and render previous abilities useless. Conversely, Hornet's new abilities should also offer something unique that doesn't undermine other mechanics, so that there are reasons to actually want to use them all. This isn't going to be an easy torch to keep lit given how effectively Hollow Knight streamlined combat in the first place, but since Team Cherry won't release Silksong until its quality matches or supersedes the original, I have no doubt that they'll be able to deliver a little something for everyone.
Number 1. Elusively vast areas. The world beyond Hollow Knight's borders is depicted to be vastly larger than the player can fathom thanks to areas that offer merely a glimpse beyond the kingdom's outskirts. In Kingdom's Edge, the player is provoked into wondering what exists outside of Hollow Knight by a tent that shelters bugs that were presumably venturing outward. At the Howling Cliffs, gusts of wind blow against attempts to leave the kingdom's bounds, fascinating the player with thoughts of the outside world. Team Cherry's comic visualizes the savage plains that Quirrell survives prior to revisiting Hollow Nest, which briefly satiates the player's fascination about what dangers lie in wait, but mostly strengthens thoughts of wilds beyond. But aside from its outermost regions, many of Hollow Nest's biomes sprawl in unique and incredible ways, while some of its ecosystems interconnect through unexplorable stagways that cement the depth of this world. Despite being an immense network of tunnels that link locations and lore, the inner burrows of the stagways remain undiscoverable no matter how many beautiful archways the player opens. By restricting access within these enigmatic channels, save for a brief glance during travel, Hollow Knight broadens the player's vast perception of Hollow Nest's size. In addition to that, the old stag optimistically expresses the notion that his species possibly thrives and has potentially left Hollow Nest's stagways, thus expanding the player's grasp of this world's reach. Similarly, trams intrigue the player by providing transport through tramways that can never actually be explored internally. Deep Nest's southernmost tramway is located near the cove in the ancient basin in which the broken vessel is combated. This cove is adjacent to the trench in which void tendrils from the abyss can be found. And within striking distance of this trench, vessels have escaped the abyss and been preyed upon by Nosk. In theory, this untraversable tramway could have possibly unveiled a section of the route through which vessels escape the abyss. Unfortunately, Team Cherry's Abyss stretch goal was not funded during Hollow Knight's development, and as a result, the Abyss remains unfinished with an unchartable tramway that elicits curiosity. However, Deep Nest and the Ancient Basin both house additional and accessible tramways that contain incredible world building. The tramway in the Ancient Basin contains a dark egg identical to the one guarded by Nosk, both of which are similar to the eggs found in the Abyss. In Deep Nest, the failed tramway illustrates the Pale King's efforts to exert his rule into Harrow's domain. These tramways are perfectly integrated into Hollow Nest's narrative and influence the player's curiosity to question what lies dormant within the remaining unexplorable tramways. Team Cherry may have actually cultivated this curiosity by allowing players to venture into the innermost depths of Silksong's travel system. In 2019's Nintendo Direct, Hornet is shown journeying through an area covered in bells similar to the areas in which she battles a boss prior to using it for transportation. Perhaps this implies that Pharloom will be vastly more explorable than Hollow Nest was, as well as tease perceivably vast outer worlds like Hollow Knight did. Thank you.
Wait, no, back up. Hang on. Dude, what are you doing? That's 5 points, dude. You can't cut off the video with an uneven number like that. No. 3 points for you, 3 points for him. That's how this shit works. I didn't make the rules, I just reinforced them. Come on. Let's have a nice, healthy debate. 3 points for each party. Okay? Okay. I'm going back to bed now. Don't fuck this up.
Memorable bosses. When designing a game that's almost entirely driven by boss fights, it should be a primary objective to make these bosses exceptionally memorable. When so much of the project hinges on whether or not enemies can make players desire to experience more of the game, there's a lot of work that's necessary for this to actually succeed. Hollow Knight produced a catalog of bosses that are almost unanimously adored by its community, but Team Cherry somehow never had to sacrifice boss quality for boss quantity. Instead, they discovered an equilibrium between making enough bosses and ensuring that they all fulfilled their roles, with varying personalities, backgrounds, aesthetics, and difficulty. Although many other games attempt a similar approach to boss design, the way Hollow Knight presented these characters never felt too overdone or underwhelming. As a massive fan of the Soulsborne series, I was able to better understand why Hollow Knight stood out by observing some rare instances where Dark Souls actually fell short. I mentioned earlier how Team Cherry didn't sacrifice well-designed bosses for more fights. Well, Dark Souls 2 unfortunately decided to walk a separate path. In the first Dark Souls, there were 26 bosses in total, including the DLC fights. But in Dark Souls 2, this number skyrocketed to 41 after all of the DLCs. To me, it was pretty clear that the second team at the helm of the sequel figured that more of what made the game fun would automatically equate to more fun overall. But Dark Souls 1 brought about the Souls-like genre, which Hollow Knight also happens to fall under, because there were enough bosses to make a lasting experience, but not too many so as to half-ass production value. Well, -1. But in Dark Souls 2? See, when the best things about the original game's bosses were their personalities, uniqueness, appearances, and movesets, it's intrinsically less interesting to fight medieval Jabba the Hutt or a literal militia of rats. When you double the amount of bosses, you're eliminating a majority of what even made them likable, since you have to cut corners to design more. As a result, there's a lack of appeal from how they look to how they fight, which goes against everything the original game set out to do. Now, what in the name of Gorb does this have to do with Hollow Knight? In my opinion, this could almost be a carbon copy of how Dark Souls was handled. A new IP presents something truly unique, generating an ungodly amount of hype and expectations for the sequel. But now, Team Cherry is able to show how a follow-up game can properly expand upon everything the original game got right. As such, it's crucial for them to not lose sight of what made Hollow Knight so enjoyable in the first place, specifically how they presented memorable bosses. Early bosses are slow and have incredibly telegraphed attacks, but gradually increase in difficulty as the player acquires new abilities. Ascended versions of these early bosses have significantly increased health, speed, and damage, requiring the player to take advantage of enhanced movement and offense to stand a chance against them. Regular Dream Warriors provide world building through straightforward and simple fights to reflect that they only possess fractions of their true power from when they were alive. By the end of the game, the hardest bosses almost always deal double damage and hardly give any moments to heal in between attacks. This sense of progressive difficulty never fails to make fighting feel engaging and victory feel rewarding. And it doesn't just stop here. Team Cherry also aesthetically designed these enemies in such a way that undeniably leaves everlasting impressions. Utter the name Markoth and see how much bitter hatred you produce. Chant the name Gorb and observe how many fans come together to praise and ascend with this goofy brainiac. Even bosses that aren't painfully difficult by nature will make fans bellow with laughter after hearing Doma Doma, or become adrenaline-induced Vulgarians when hearing the Mantis Lord soundtrack. But on the other hand, none of this personality is lost with difficult bosses. Grim is idolized because of how badass he looks and feels to fight. The Radiance fosters as much attraction as she does frustration, while Grey Prince Zote and Pure Vessel have relatively dedicated fan bases either despising or adoring them. No boss is too small to have a personality, or too difficult to not love in some way. And since Team Cherry has adopted this less is more mindset, hopefully we'll see all of these motifs reproduced in SILKSONG's bosses. Although I have to admit, with this luxurious looking lad named Trobbio and everyone that Leth has teased, I'd say Team Cherry is looking to hit the ground running when it comes to interesting and memorable bosses all over again.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out the videos on screen now to binge with more SILKSONG videos, and take a look in the description for more Hollow Knight content. And special thanks to our very first patron. Want to vote on the next video topic, gain early access to new videos, behind the scenes footage, and more? Consider becoming a patron.